start recording here. So, you know, we can have a historical record, and anybody who can't make it, because obviously with people from around the world, getting the right daytime combination where everybody can participate reasonably is quite difficult. And then we have this LinkedIn page has 397 members who claim they're interested in this stuff. It hasn't been very active, but it could be. It exists. It says chapter, but so what? We could rename it, I suppose. So what I'm trying to say is using these basic tools, Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, we should be able to communicate as a SIG or a chapter, whatever it will be. And I recommend just doing what we're doing every couple of months, maybe less in the summer, meet online like this, and probably have a paper, a little bit of business, and then somebody presents a paper or whatever. People want to do more than that. God bless America or whatever. I mean, super. But, you know, I don't think we're there yet. But I think this is doable, this sort of thing. The technological, whatever is happening today aside. And this is a little bit of a weird meeting. This is, I literally finished just cutting my lawn because it's a Saturday afternoon here by me. And so then I'm sitting in my garage. But it's kind of cool, you know? But a Saturday afternoon, you know, I don't know how easy that is for people. It might be very, you know, I don't know. But I would just say, continue doing what we're doing. I'm looking at my notes here. SIG. Oh, and then in terms of a strategic plan, I can't really say that Khalid and I have done a lot. We've kind of chatted about it a handful of times. Saeed Langaruti prepared a little document, a thought piece on the strategic planning stuff, and he is very interested in sort of taking the lead on facilitating that. And it's kind of funny. He asked me, do we have any such documents? Did we ever do that before? And I go, nah, we have a constitution. I know because I wrote it. But you have to have one if you're a chapter. Can you send me a copy? And I go, sure, if I can find it. And I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere. I mean, I had old storage devices on using old computers to get at them and whatever. Couldn't find it. Good news is Oleg was kind enough to look, and he had that document and others. So we forwarded that to Saeed, and not that it had a lot of strategic whatever, it had our goals and stuff like that. And then that triggered him writing a little thought piece about moving the strategic plan forward. In other words, going beyond whatever we're doing right now. And that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts.
Hey, Mike, this is Khalid. I just joined.
Khalid, yeah. From Pakistan? Are you in Pakistan?
I came back a while ago.
Oh, so you're all jet lagged then?
I'm okay.
All right.
So I see you are sitting in your garage. I can see
my old garage, not my new garage, but yes.
So how many people are in the meeting right now?
Six.
Six? All right.
We don't have our guest speaker, though. I don't know why.
I see, yeah.
Mike, one thing that I would like to suggest, in addition to having a discussion of different models periodically, what if we really got brave and decided to step up to the plate and do some short-term forecasting? And even have a little, maybe a little competition. Let's see if we can do as well as some of the blue chippers.
So, like, anything goes? Or it has to be system dynamics? Or
I know, well, presumably the most of it would be system dynamics. And since, you know, that's at odds a little bit with the typical SD approach, which is more longer term. Strikes me that if we think of the long term as really a collection of short terms, we ought to be able to roll that back and do some short-term work, and at least have it structurally sound. And if our forecasts are similar or different from non-system dynamics forecasts, it'd be an interesting discussion as to why that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have no objection. I would say stream of consciousness, I would say, forecasting what? If you're trying to hit the next number in a series of numbers, the next month's unemployment rate in the United States, U3 or something, or GDP or something, I certainly wouldn't use system dynamics. I'd use a neural net or something. The idea is to get the next number.
Well, I think.
Sorry about being slow, guys.
My reaction to that
my
would be
apologies
a little different. You ought to be able to.
Yeah. Well, 1 second, David. Sorry, Steve. Hi, Steve. Can you hear me?
With us? Oh, there's Steve.
Hello.
Oh, there you are, Steve.
Sorry, guys. I just got caught up in family stuff here. My apologies.
No troubles. We're just chit-chatting. Good to see.
Okay. Well, when you're ready to Minsky chat, let me know.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll complete our chit-chat, and then we'll turn things over to you, Steve, if you give us a minute here, okay?
No problem. Okay.
Sorry, David, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, all I wanted to say was it's not so much a question of, if you had to go to Las Vegas, what methodology would you use to predict next month's unemployment? The question I'm more interested in is a short-term number that comes out of a system dynamics model in the right ballpark with other short-term forecasts. And I'm not talking necessarily about next month, but if you were to do a forecast of, say, a medium-term forecast, then it really should not be at odds with some sort of numerical analysis that might be used to do some forecasting.
What I would say, okay, so if I would complete, my thought from before, forecasting the next number or the next two numbers or whatever in a series of numbers, I wouldn't really use system dynamics if the idea was get as close as possible to next quarter or next whatever. But if you're saying we should forecast the likely results from the Green New Deal that's been proposed, or Trump's tariffs, or this sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's a different sort of forecast, and that's what we're particularly good at with system dynamics, I should think. But I'm just giving you stream of consciousness, reaction to what you asked, and it doesn't get right or wrong or whatever. I'm just
Well, I agree. As I said, if I were trying to come up with a number to take to Las Vegas and make a prediction that where money depended on it, I might use a completely different methodology if we were talking about a really short-term forecast. On the other hand, it would seem to me, even if we were trying to predict the next number, a number a year from now, then what comes out of our model should not be at odds or totally inconsistent with what maybe the best methodology for short-term forecasting would be.
Sure, and and if it is really different, then there should be a compelling why
exactly
we could attach to it.
If I might add my 2 cents worth, actually, it will depend on the model. What is it's designed to do? I'm reminded of an exercise that Lester Thurow used to give at MIT. When I took his course, the first homework was to forecast 10 economic indicators, which would be announced after we submitted the assignment. And he didn't bother about methodology, he just wanted 10 numbers. And you would be graded on your accuracy when they were compared to the forecasts which came out, and these were quarterly forecasts. So they would come out before he would announce the results, but you have to submit the forecast before these numbers were announced by the Bureau of Statistics. And I have, the first time I took the course, I had an overload. And in the end, I decided to drop the course because my performance in that assignment was not good. And I followed a very sophisticated method. My background was industrial engineering. I took all the numbers which were in the papers. I used a weighting function based on their credibility. And I thought my method was excellent. I was an industrial engineer and I performed very badly. And so I said, well, this is an overload. I was going to drop one course anyway, so I dropped this one. And the following year, I took the course again, and the same assignment came, and I had less time this time, so I just plugged in 10 numbers there. And I got an A in the homework. So I don't know, David. I think maybe system dynamics models will perform quite badly as far as the numbers forecasts are concerned. And it will depend on the model and the purpose of the model.
Well, of course. So I think that one of the reasons I raised the issue is that most system dynamics models are not empirical. They're theoretical models. And so, you would narrow down your subset very, very quickly. I'd just be interested in seeing who has an empirical model that could make a forecast and then give some justification for the results.
I would like to say that our models are empirical in terms of the decision rules. I mean, if you need to understand that these models are based on they're not based on theory. These are theories of the empirical situations. So they are empirical if you look at the model structure. And
by empirical, I mean, given the model structure that your theory has guided, that your development, then you calibrate the model so that the same structure then with some modifications or calibrated to a particular economy.
I would still say, since the model only represents a slice of the problem, the calibration that you plug in, even if we follow the rules that it should be direct measurements, the direct measurements are coming from a system which is more complex than the model. So we might not end up with the right parameters there. So I would still say that forecast is in any way would be a heroic long shot.
Yeah. Well, I come to all of my work from a long time as a consultant before I was an academic. And so when clients ask me for a number, I like to be able to give a number and have some justification for it. And I would be disappointed if every time someone asked me for an economic forecast, I had to go somewhere else other than the methodology I use to think about economics. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying, would some of us be courageous enough to try that?
I would encourage you to do that.
Okay.
I don't have the courage.
All right.
Okay, so with that, we do have our guest speaker here, and we'll resume this sort of chit chat on these, things a chapter might do going forward in future meetings. But we do have our guest speaker here, Steve Keene, a longtime friend of mine. I think I met you in 2003, Steve.
Something like that, yeah.
Kansas City, back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we even shared a locker for a short time at WPI and went running and stuff. So all good stuff. And I can't remember what the number was the last time I Googled your name. I do it for my students a lot, and it came up with some crazy, like 30 million hits on something like that. So Steve is very well known. He is a very, very bold economist. Speaking of David and his, commentary about being bold, Steve Keene is very bold. And he's going to tell us today about his research and a software tool he has been developing. I don't think he writes the code for it, but he's the visionary behind it, called Minsky. So with that, Steve, I'll let you take over, and good to see you.
Hey, mate. Okay, can you? How do I go about getting the screen, capturing the screen here?
Right.
By the way.
So I need to stop sharing, which I just
Yeah.
did, and then I think you're allowed to, I think, share.
Yeah.
You have to go to the menu, I think at the bottom, and it says share.
Okay, so I'll go to that. Hang on a second. Where are we? Zoom here. Okay. And then down the bottom, okay, share. Yep. And share the main screen as that works. Okay. Right. Okay. So just hang on. I was actually just while I was going, it's loading a couple of demo files here. So I'll get this last one loaded and then I can start talking. Here we go. Hang on. All right. Okay. Well, what you're seeing on screen is Minsky. And I'll just give a bit of background for it first of all. Let's bring up a few little points here. So I'm just talking about how it compares. Who does not use, oh, hang on, we've got a hand waving here with somebody. Is there a problem? Okay. Who does not use VenSim?
I don't.
Okay, but everybody, what do you use instead?
Stellar Architect.
Okay, so Stellar and VenSim, I think, are fairly related programs. So I was just talking about how does Minsky compare to them? Well, the first point is it's free, which I think is a reasonable advantage. And what we've now set up a Patreon page to raise funds for it and develop a user community. Because one thing you can't do with SourceForge, where we still load the source code, is you can't find out who's downloaded the program, who's using it, and so on. So instead, what we're doing is using it from. Actually, I might move my camera. Yep, now. So we got the Patreon page. Minimum sign up is $1 a month, and we release all the betas there and all the compiled versions, but the source code is still on SourceForge. That's fairly useful, I hope. Another thing about it, I'll just make it a bit larger so you can see this particular model here, just to bring up some of how it differs from VenSim. You can pretty see it straight away because you're all used to the format. We do our equations graphically on screen. Now, this is actually more related to what you'd see in Simulink, but more importantly, a program called VisSim, which I think was better than Simulink, but it seems not to have got penetration in the engineering market. So what we have is, rather than having stocks and flows and boxes in which the equations are stated, everything is done on screen, and there's our integral block. So I find the stellar thing with a long cable coming in, little box, long thing coming out, clouds at both ends, wastes a huge amount of screen space, in my opinion. So we designed this very much as a mathematician would do. So you have an integral block coming in through the top. You notice when I've got the highlight over the object, you can see the wiring hoops to which you connect one object to another. This one is for initial condition. So I don't think I've actually got I haven't put that one in there, so I'll just whack it in. If I say W O, actually make it uppercase W, or W underscore O R, let's say uppercase O. Let's see, yep. And I'll go the initial value, say 0.8. I could give it a range, but I'll just leave it at that for the moment, just to put it there. So you can, hang on, where did I put it? Ah, okay, that's it there. And I'll just flip it around and then attach it to the bottom of the integral block, and that's giving me an initial condition on. Let's try that again. An initial condition as well as the integral block. So it's very much the way that a mathematician would design a system dynamics program. And this particular one is my model of Minsky's financial instability hypothesis. And just to lead you through the components, I'll just make it a bit wider here. He says, well, let's just make it full screen. So this is saying the capital stock divided by capital output gives you real output, divided by labour productivity gives you employment, number of workers, by population gives you an employment rate. This feeds it into a Phillips curve relationship, which gives you a wage rate. Then you have more the wage rate by labour, you get the wage bill. I sort of stuffed that up by grabbing the wrong object a moment ago. subtract the wage bill and interest payments from output, you get profit. Divide profit by capital, you get the rate of profit. That's like a Phillips curve for investors now, or capitalists, giving a level of real investment as a percentage of GDP. Multiply by GDP, you get gross investment. This is then saying if that's greater than profits, then you've got to borrow money from the bankers. You then have depreciation subtracted from gross investment to give you net investment, and that closes the circle. And the thing which is unlike any other system of the dynamics program is this bit in the middle, and that's what we call the Godley table. This is a very simple example of one. But this is to enable you to do financial flows and make sure you get all your financial accounts done properly. So BS is bank finance, which is what gives you a rate of change of debt. This is the wages being paid out and wages being consumed, interest being paid out, interest being consumed. So this is a Koleskian model in that sense. Capitalists get what they spend, workers spend what they get. And what this is doing is generating a set of differential equations in terms of the level of debt, level of reserves, which we're not modeling, and this middle of firms' deposits, household deposits, and bankers' equity. And so this column actually says that the rate of change of F is BF minus, just BF, because minus WW cancel out, ditto over here. So that's a very simple way of getting the accounting right for a monetary system. I'll just give a quick simulation of this. Another advantage over VenSim and Co is you see the simulations happening live on screen, which I find much, much better for making a case about what does your model actually generate and so on. This is the model that I did back in 1992. They were linear rather than non-linear behavioral functions here, giving me a great moderation before a great recession. So that's how I got involved with Mike in that sense, because he knew about this paper. So that's a very quick look at Minsky. Some things you'll find that are obviously different to the programs you're used to. You notice I've got a Greek. Can you see the Greek delta there?
Yes.
Okay. Lowercase k, uppercase r. So what we're doing is using latex formatting to give you some control over the rather better control over the formatting than you get in the standard program. So it's latex language. So slash delta gives you the delta sign. The underscore with the curly brackets puts everything else in lower case. The K followed by a caret gives you the raised text. So what you're used to in latex formatting, if you're all familiar with latex, you can use that to format and get rather better looking variables than you find in the other programs. Let's see what else I can mention here.
Steve, can you show everybody the equation version of the model?
Yep.
I'll go over to that.
So it generates the equations as well. I can't make that much larger. I hope you can read that on your screens.
Yeah.
That's stating all the parameter values, all the definitions are stated instantly, and you can see that things like BF here are defined elsewhere. So it doesn't expand out the entire equation. You could do that yourself later if you like. I think it makes it rather easier to read and see what the actual components are.
Yeah, I like this, Steve. I like this format for the equations better than, let's say, VenSim.
Yeah.
It always looks computer code-ish.
Yeah, yeah.
It looks like a traditional model you'd find in an economics paper.
Yeah, exactly. We also export everything. We have 3 forms of export. We can export the entire model as a latex document, which you can load into a latex processor. And if you put up with the time involved, you can load it into Word as well. There's latex output, PostScript, PDF, and SVG for a vector graphics format, and then MATLAB as well, so you can load it into MATLAB. We don't work the opposite way yet, but we do work, and you can put it inside MATLAB once you've designed a model and do any fine-tuning you want there. So there's a fair bit of flexibility and reasonable interoperability with it. So that's the overall design format. Just to mention, I mentioned the fact that we use a flow and integral approach rather than the stock and flow idea that comes out of iStella, I think, and Stella. We graphically overload operators. One thing I found annoying with some of the programs, you had to add extra. If you're doing a graphical thing like with VisSim, if you wanted to have 3 things multiplied together, you had to add an extra port on the add function. What we do is simply overload operators that can handle more than one input. So this has got 3 things being added to an add to addition sign. I could have as many as I like. If I added another one just by wiring it up there, then hang on, sorry, I grabbed the wrong end. You can add as many as you like, so it makes it easy to make quite complex additions, subtractions, multiplications, and so on. I won't say that what I've done to that one, obviously. Let's shut that one down.
Steve, I might add, as long as we're chit-chatting here, a System Dynamics version of your model recently appeared in a paper in the System Dynamics review.
Yeah, I saw it and I met the author.
Yeah.
Nice piece of work. Yeah, good to see. This is looking at like handling the sort of standard dynamic systems model. This is the double pendulum, and it took a while to write the equation this way because they actually come in. This is how you actually write the equations initially. It's just a set of differential equations with, sine and cosine inside there as well. This is the double pendulum, and it does quite a nice job of indicating the behavior of the system there. We don't yet have the capacity to add levers to show, how the actual double pendulum would operate, but all the dynamics are easily captured there. And little things we've done, which I think make it easier. You can see the little dot at the beginning of each of the graphs there. So rather than, I hope you can see it as it goes around, so you actually know whereabouts you're in a complicated phase diagram like this, you actually know where the system is up to, because the dot will tell you where the pattern is. Otherwise, I don't think you can keep track of those things. We also have a few fancy tricks with the graph. So this is setting a range. We have ranges set on the axes, and this is this GS is defined as being, I think, t minus 31. So it's giving you 31-second delay here, so you can see what's happening across the window and see how the simulation is behaving. Little things that I hope make the usability reasonably high. We don't have to use wires for everything. So you'll notice over here, this is the Renz model. Oh, now that's a bug. I wanted to talk about that. We've got lots of bugs. The total development funding for the program so far is $250,000, which is dreadful. Nothing like what you need for a decent program. I don't know what caused that one. I'll just sort of see if I can reload it. Do not save. Now somehow it's corrupted that file. That's the bad news. The good news is I've just got £200,000 funding from Friends Provident Foundation in the UK to basically work on all the fine-tune the interface and get rid of all the bugs. So that's the main focus. The money's actually specifically dedicated to that. So that sort of bug should disappear, I hope. I certainly want to. I wish I was recording the screen. Are you recording this, Mike?
I sure am.
Great. Send me a copy of that. I want to show it to Russell. That's an obvious bug we need to get rid of. Let's see. So this is a slightly more complicated model. This is a Minsky model with price dynamics in it. And one thing you'll notice is that, for example, down here I've got the rate of, that's RP for the rate of the inflation component of my interest rate equation in this model. So RP is down here. It's then used, it's used up here to have an argument in the rate of inflation. So you can pass by variable name rather than passing by wire. So this is still a fairly messy diagram, I have to confess, but it was actually, we changed the formats at various times, and what we find is that it doesn't quite relocate the newly defined, which is where the old ones were, so things get overwritten, but which is what's actually happened here. But you can see where, like, I'm defining the price level here, and then the price level turns up over here. So I don't need to wire it together. So even there's a lot of spaghetti on this screen, one thing we're trying to do in the design is minimize spaghetti diagram problems. And one thing we will be doing in the new version, once we get enough, with the finance we have to do it, is sufficient to do this. We're going to add a definitions tab up here, so as well as the equations, and that's the set of equations for that model, as well as showing the equations as an output. We'll also be able to store these equations on a definitions tab. And so take, for example, the nominal rate of interest here and just take it off the screen and just remain with just the flowchart dynamics without the definitions cluttering the screen. Because I don't know about you guys, but I find a lot of systems dynamics programs almost impossible to read because of the clutter from all the wires and so on. So we've only got the version 1.0 type functionality here. What we're going to do with this funding is get to the case where we can remove all this stuff here, or just disappear from the main screen, just leaving the causal function here, and the definitions will be over in another tab here, and you can go between the two. So that's hopefully about 6 months away. Let's see. The main thing that makes it different is when you look at things like modelling financial flows. This is a model of the Portuguese economy done by a PhD student of mine. Speaking of forecasting and accuracy, Dave, it actually is more accurate as a out of sample forecaster than the models used by the Portuguese Central Bank and the Portuguese Treasury. My students tested it against them. It beats them hands down. And the reason is, of course, we're modelling money. The way you model money, I'll dive inside one of these godly tables here. This is the biggest for the financial sector. Hang on. I went under the went for the description. It's very sensitive to the right mouse. I was on description when I chose that rather than, yeah, hang on. Okay, click carefully, Steve. Open godly table. Right, that's what I wanted to do. So this is a table of the financial accounts of the financial sector in Portugal. It's taken directly from the flow of funds table for the Portuguese economy. So what you've got here is like wages and mixed incomes coming out of current time deposit, coming out of the current account, going to current time deposits. I don't actually understand the entire model here. It's done by one of my PhD students. But you can see the amount of detail inside there. And the advantage of doing the double entry bookkeeping over the flowchart approach is if you decide something might be classified as a liability when in fact it's an asset, it's easy to move it around and still maintain consistency in the program. And I'll show you an example of that shortly. But all this stuff is defining a set of differential equations, which would be a nightmare to maintain. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 system states. And what's happening here is that the accounting rule that assets minus liability minus equity equals 0 is applied to each of the rows to make sure that the rows are correct, which means we know it's stock flow consistent. What happens in one account occurs in another, and it's very easy to change definitions. If I, for example, drag this one to the wrong location, which I've just done, then Minsky tells me it's wrong over here. Okay, so that makes it, I think, far easier to handle financial modelling than in packages like Vensim or Stellar, I think. And a good illustration of that, I'll just load a simpler program here. You know, do any of you know that I had a battle with Paul Krugman online about 7 years ago? Had a big fight with Paul Krugman. Good fun, attacking non-orthodox economics. And he was pushing the loanable funds vision of how banks operate. So saying, you know, banks take in deposits and lend them out to other people. They're intermediate, they don't originate debt. And I thought I'd take his model and put it into a Minsky program and show what was the effect of his way that he thought banks operated and then changing to the real world. So what is going on here, and this is much easier to explain because it's a much smaller model. What I have here, this is the bank's view of the financial sector, and it has reserves as an asset and nothing else, and then consumer deposits, investment deposits, workers' deposits, and banks as liabilities, and banks' equity is its own equity. The program, again, is making sure initial conditions all sum to 0, which is necessary. And then I have lending by the consumer sector to the investment sector, in sector repaying, investment sector paying interest, consumer sector paying an introduction fee to the bank. The neoclassicals have what I call an Ashley Madison theory of banking. And then paying wages for consumption workers, paying for investment workers, buying consumer goods off by the investment sector, the consumer sector buying investment goods, workers buying consumption goods, bankers consuming, and bankers investing. So, like in terms of trying to explain that, I think that's a lot easier to explain than a bunch of wires everywhere. Very, very straightforward. And what I've then done is set up a whole set of time lags. So I use time constants quite widely in my Minsky model. So this is saying the level of purchase of consumer sector goods by the investment sector is dependent upon the amount of money in the investment sector's goods divided by a time constant for its rate of buying those, which I've set at 5 years to double the level of purchasing. And over here, I've got the time constant for lending. So the smaller the time constant, the faster the lending. Time constant for repayment, the smaller the time constant, the faster the repayment. So I've got loans effectively doubling every 7 years and repayment halving debt every 9 years. And this is the way that neoclassicals think the banking sector operates. So I can just simulate it straight away and see what happens. And lo and behold, you get zero growth, constant GDP, rising debt level, and no change in the money stock because there's no recreation of money coming out of this. And notice that if I increase lending speed, I actually reduce the rate of growth temporarily. And if I slow down how fast repayment happens, so repayments is happening more slowly, hang on, pardon me, that actually further reduces the growth rate. So you've got an increase in debt with a slowdown in the economy, not much, it goes back to 200 again, and I can go in the opposite direction and slow down lending and increase how fast repayment happens, and that actually boosts the economy, the debt level falls, but overall, bugger all impact. So this is the neoclassical vision that you don't really need to worry about the finance sector. You can ignore it in macroeconomics. So that's the way they think. Now, having done that, I can say, well, your model's bullshit. Let's go to the consumer sector. And let's now say that the debt, let's see. The debt is not an asset for the consumer sector, so I can delete debt from the model as an asset, but it's still there as a liability because it's a liability of the investment sector. I can delete the lending, debt repayment, interest payments, and bank fee operations. I should fix those up, but I'll just do a quick demo, not worry about that. Come across to the banking sector's model and then say, well, in fact, that asset, the liability of the debt is actually an asset of the banking sector. Click on the down arrow here. It says what liabilities haven't been allocated as assets elsewhere in the model. That's debt. This actually comes across at the wrong point initially. I'm not quite certain why that's happening now, but I can just drag that up to the right level and do the same with repayments. So it's now consistent. And then delete the bank fee, which is unnecessary in the model as it stands, and say that the interest payments are made to the bank. And Minsky makes sure that's correct. Having done that, reset the model, hit run, and we're in a different world. Positive growth, increasing level of debt increases the amount of money supply. If lending accelerates, growth accelerates. If repayment slows down, accelerates even more. And then if you have a turn to faster repayment and slower lending, you get a recession. And so that's something that I think I can do faster in Minsky than you could do in any other program, while still making sure the consistency is there because of the impact of the double entry bookkeeping tables on handling the financial dynamics, which I found when I tried to do those in system dynamics models like VenSim, VisSim, and so on. It was just a nightmare. If you realize you made a mistake and you want to change the definition, it was hell to pay. With Minsky, it's very, very easy to go about redefining and so on. So that's...
Steve, one small question. First of all, this is fascinating. My background is control engineering. Flow chart looks a little bit like the control engineering flow charts that we used to make. Now this triangular icon here.
Show me, which one?
Looks like the amplifier or any addition, any function that we created, and we could actually find an input-output relationship of this triangular icon there. What would be the equation? What would be the mathematics inside this can icon?
I can't actually. Which one do you mean, Khalid? I can't actually see which one you. I don't know. If you can
click on any one. So I just want to see how it converts the inputs into the outputs.
Like this one here, the one I'm moving. That's just a.
What's inside?
Okay, well that's a divide by box. So it's nothing inside it. It's just a divide by. So this investment deposits divided by the time constant for consumer purchases of investment, or investment goods of purchases of consumer goods.
So, any operation can be represented by this,
yeah,
this arrow.
And like, for example, if you want to multiply key, just press the multiply key. You want to divide by key, press the divide by key. We haven't actually got I think we've got a power function inside here as well, but it's all just a case of type it on the keyboard wherever you want it to occur. Okay. So, okay, and these are now vectorized. So about 6 weeks ago they weren't. We've now got vector support. So all your dot product and everything else is turning up here as well.
What if there are 3 or 4 inputs to this operator?
Oh, that's fine. As long as the operator handles overload, you can overload as much as you like.
I see.
So,
and it's still an algebraic function. So
yeah.
I see. All right.
Yeah, well, algebraic. You've got your pardon me. You've got your differential operators elsewhere, of course. Oh, by the way, we have differentiation in here as well, and it's actually symbolic differentiation.
I see. And
headphones going crazy here.
I see. So instead of integration that we do,
sorry, I'm not here. My headphone is. So I'll actually take it out and change to the speakers on the. Pardon me, I can't hear with this set of headphones. Hang on. Sorry about this. And I'll try it again. Just sometimes it buggers up, and I don't know why.
So my question was, you do differentiation and not integration through these operators?
Well, integration is separate. So like an integral operator is if you want an integral operator, as I've just done on screen, type the ampersand or choose it from up here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I can't really, I should actually try to zoom this screen here, but all your basic mathematical operator here, there's your integral block, addition, subtraction, log, logical operators, minimum, maximum, differential, and then a switch, a logical switch function, so on and so forth. So all the operators you'll be used to. We're probably missing a few, but having added the tensor components recently, it's now got all the mathematical operators you'd need, I think.
So it can do the algebraic operations, it can do integration.
Oh, yeah.
And it can do differentiation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely essential. Yeah. We're just using a Runge cutter algorithm, Runge cutter 4.5 at the moment, and somebody's about to add the Levenberg-Marquardt system for us, which we'll use both for simulation and also for parameter estimation, which is the next feature we want to add.
Steve, how do you determine the sequence? Just looking at the diagram, you were moving that divide operator a moment ago. So you've got an investment and then you've got a time constant. So how does the time operator know, how does the division operator know which one is the numerator and which one is the denominator?
Oh, it's because this is the top and the bottom. So the top is the numerator and the bottom is the denominator.
So you just physically locate them?
Physically, that's all it is. It's exactly the same as mathematics.
I see. If you reverse the location, if you bring the top box down.
Okay, if I can delete the wires, I could do that if I wanted to and put it upside down and stuff up the model, but it'll accept the operation.
Oh, I see. It's connecting to the corner of the triangle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't really matter where the icon is located, where the variable is located. It's the connection.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So we're using the wiring concept, of course, as the same fundamental logic as most of the systems dynamics programs. But what we do intend adding in the next major variation is to let you actually define all this stuff. Literally, you should write it on a screen. I don't know how many guys use MathCAD. Any MathCAD users here? None. Okay. MathCAD, what I like about MathCAD, and I've copied MathCAD as one of the ideas. It's been stuffed up by the owners, by the way. The people who bought this program have fucked it up completely. So I'm using a version which is 9 years old now. But if you want to do differentiation with this, for example, put a differential block. For example, And I like that so much. And it's actually a real equation. It doesn't mean anything in what I've sketched up there, but it literally means you can write equations faster than you can on paper. And what I intend is bringing that across to Minsky as well. So rather than using the canvas to write the equations, you can actually write them in a tab over here, and then they'll be available for use on the canvas as well.
And Steve, you can use the same input multiple times, like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I've got IC investment. If I wanted to, I've got those. I could actually drag it out to here, and down to here, and whack it over. Anything it takes, anything which is not yet defined. I've already defined them, so it won't accept this. Oh, it did. That's pretty bad.
You can also connect any output to any input.
Yeah. So we have three types of variables here. Notice this is the variable, so it has an input and an output. This is a parameter. It only has an output. And then we have integral blocks, which take an input and a initial value. And there's also constants, which you can't change. The constant there has an output but no input. But in each of them, if you want to, like you notice there's a little dot at the top here. That's indicating you can actually move the dot to change the value while you're running a simulation. And we also use the arrow key. So if you hold the arrow key and you want to change a value, then you can change it live while the simulation is running. So it gives you a control pad.
Why do you specify the DT?
Right, pardon?
The DT, the time step.
The DT? Oh, you mean in terms of the time step?
Yes.
The time step for the simulation, it's runge cutter. So it's an adaptive runge cutter. So what do you get if you, I don't know how you're all familiar with the runge cutter algorithm or not?
Yeah, a little, yeah.
Yeah, okay. It chooses the best step size. Basically it's a fifth order Taylor expansion, and then it'll choose the best step size given the rate at which the system is changing. We're just using a stock standard open source library at the moment. Yeah.
That determines the integration method, though. I think what Solomon was asking about was the recalculation by the software for updating the value of data.
Yeah. That's coming out of the runge cutter. We don't have. We do have a small time step control. Let's see. Look in your options, and the runge cutter here. Pardon me.
So basically, runge cutter gives a variable DT.
Yeah. So you have, if you set your maximum step size, your absolute error, relative error, and the order of the solver.
Right.
You can control that much. And we've got a new guy coming on board doing a bit of volunteer work shortly. He's going to whack in the Levenberg Mark Watt system as well, which is very flexible, probably superior to runge cutter.
Yeah.
But we'll have those two solvers shortly.
Yeah, but you're setting the step size in that column, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But it's just the initial size. The program changes it depending on the error.
Yeah. Depending on the values at different points, yeah.
Is it true that it allows some feedback, right? It doesn't prevent it from being
implemented. Oh yeah,
implemented.
it's all feedback based, exactly the same as any System Dynamics program. So, like if I bring up the like one of the classic ones for feedback is this is actually that's a model of climate change. Where's my Lorenz one got to? Let's see, I've got too many. I'll load the Lorenz one again. There you go. Hope it doesn't crash on me this time. So this is the classic one for feedback, of course. And again, we don't need to wire everything together. That's the definition for that's literally the way it's defined in mathematical equations for dx dt. There's dy dt, there's dz dt. And they have a separate simulation, exactly the same variables, because it's slightly different parameter values to show the dependence upon initial conditions. In a short while, you'll see the two simulations here start to diverge. So that's making the point about initial conditions. And what it looks like when you look at the equations, it's just a straight, exactly the same way you'd write it in the mathematics program for the Lorenz equations.
Is there a way to see the feedbacks, like somehow, like you click some button and it shows like how it goes?
Oh, you mean in terms of the causal loop?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Well, something like that. Mhm.
Yeah, we'll see with not here, for example. So this is just a set of differential equations.
Okay.
If I go to, let's see, what's a good one for that? This one. So the causal loop, I can read through what it is here, but in terms of highlighting, like on pi n, which is net profit here, and or profit in nominal terms rather, and seeing what it depends upon, I can ask to find the definition.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do a very good job. There we are. That's where it's defined. So there's a circle turns up. So you can see where the definition is. If I come down, let's say I've got pi n over here, choose find definition, then it highlights that spot. But in terms of showing the causal structure, no, not yet. That's another thing for the next version.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
So I'd like you guys to give it a trial. Just try to see what you think of it. With the caveat, there's plenty of bugs right now, but we want to get this improved to the stage where it's rock solid, less clutter on the diagram, and then more ease of use in terms of putting the systems in and giving it the capability to handle large-scale vector operations as well, which we've just started on doing.
Steve, if you were to make a feedback loop in Minsky without an integral, is it a triangle, involved in the loop, would Minsky give an error?
Oh, yeah. Algebraic loop.
Yeah, it's a simultaneous equation.
Oh, yeah. Fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. We don't have any way of handling. I know that's something you do get in packages like VenSim, getting an algebraic loop. You actually want to define something algebraically. We just want it as, too much recursion. It'd fail.
Yeah, but do you get a window on the screen that pops up and says there's an error or something?
Yeah.
Steve, can you also specify the units on?
Yes, that's a big. Thank you for that one. That's fairly new, so I haven't used units there. But I'll just bring up let's say if I'm starting in terms of defining, let's say I've got output, define y for output, and then I say it's in units of. I hope you can see this on screen. It's I'll define that, say, in units of dollars. And then if I'll have A for, let's call this labor productivity. Spell it properly, first of all. So lab prod. And I can say this is, say, initial value of 1, and say this is dollars per worker. And then if I whack a divide by key here and say, okay, let's make it a bit larger, not made that large. Okay. So if I divide output by labor productivity to give me L and wire that up, then let's see if it's done it properly. It hasn't actually done the units there yet. Maybe I'll hit the recalculate button. Let's just see, recalculate is actually the stop key at the moment. I'll put a value, let's put a value inside here. And now this has got a value of 100. And its units, you might notice, are worker. Okay. So it's doing the unit calculations for you. If I then, if I divide, say if I bring in N for population, and give that a value of, say, 120, and then say this is also dimension in terms of worker, and then divide by over here, and define lambda as my employment rate, and then wire it up, then that's going to be dimensionless. So yeah, so we're still working on units. It's just been added. We don't probably do unit cancellation yet. So you got to sort of work to the -1 times work to the -1 times worker string. We want to get to the stage shortly where that all cancels. So it'll do the unit calculations for you.
Yeah, that's very important. System dynamicists obsess about dimensionally correct equations.
So am I. I needed the funding. Russell done this for free so far. We've got to pay him back with some of the money from Friends Providence shortly. Yeah. Shall I whack up a quick model and show you what it's like to design a model rapidly? Would that be useful?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sure, sure.
Well, I'll do the basic Goodwin model. That's probably the best way to go. And I'll start with, as I say, with output. And just find that I won't try Unity. I don't want to trust my luck and find that I've got a bug in how we define them, because it's a very new feature we've added. So there's output. And then I'm going to divide that by labor productivity. I'm just using the curly brackets to give me a subscript here and give that a value, say, 1. Oh, the one that'll tick, but notice that the note of the cursor is currently flashing. I want to type initial value here. I wasn't careful. I came down here. The cursor moves. The focus moves with the cursor. That's something that Russell set up, and I can't make him change it. So we're stuck with that. Okay. So we now divide.
He's waiting to get paid.
He's got a fair bit of input into this program. It ain't just me, let me tell you. So labor now is my variable there. And so wire that up. And then have population. You get, say, value of 120 for that. And then notice, by the way, I've got the move icon is here. That's another bug. Press the shift key and it goes away. All these things we've got to get, there's a little bug I know they're there, we've got to get rid of them. But that's going to give you your employment rate. So I'll use lambda for that to indicate the use of Greek notation, which again, I think we're the only program that supports that. So there's your employment rate. Now if I say there's a lambda lowercase z for 0, which is the point at which workers accept no wage rise, and I then, the type of minus key, go to subtract, goes straight onto the canvas, no need to go up to the icons to bring it down. So there's your gap between the actual employment level and the level that workers accept no wage rise on. Multiply that by, say, lambda uppercase S for slope, give it a value, say, 10. So if there's a 10%, if there's a 1% difference, that's no, I've mistyped that. Go back and edit that. LAM BDA. Okay, there's lambda S, and multiply key, and multiply by the gap. I can call this just P underscore H uppercase C, for example, to say it's a Phillips curve, just for the sake of labeling. That's that. Now I want to have this giving my wage level. So I need an integral for the wage rate, because we've got a percentage rate of change of wages as the Phillips curve. If I type the ampersand, that's a rapid way of typing integral block on the screen. And as they make this say W for the wage, actually lowercase w, and give it a value, say 1 to start with. Then notice I've got an integral block coming in here. So that's, I meant to make that lowercase, I've still got it uppercase. Okay, W, I won't give it an initial value there. And what I'm going to do, why is it? I'm sure I must have the caps lock key. There we go, lowercase is what I want. Okay, that's right. Now I can take a copy of that variable and drag it over here. Okay, and I wanted a WO initial wage rate. And I can make that into a parameter. So I'll just choose a parameter instead and give that a value of 1 with a maximum, say, of 2 and a minimum of 0.2 and a step size of 0.1. I've got maximum of 2 there. That's now blue, as you can see. And it only has an output port, not an input port. I'll just flip that around. There's your initial condition. And I've got for the Phillips curve, I'm saying that's now flipped as well. I've got to turn it back the opposite direction. Once you flip, it maintains the flip. So now it's the Phillips curve multiplied by the current wage rate, integrated is the wage rate. And then if I now multiply the wage rate by labour, I can take a copy of labour here, bring up here, multiply key, labour, hang on, times the wage rate is wages. Hang on. Sometimes a bit of a tricky thing in getting the Y to drag out of that element. Now, output minus wages is profit. And I'll use uppercase pi for that. So subtract here, output, pardon me, output minus wages is equal to profit. Now in the simple Goodwin model, everything is invested. So I just wire those together. Because advancement is the rate of change of the capital stock, so I need a capital stock. So I come, hang on, I may have made an error there by, I'll call this bugger all. Don't know what I did there. Doesn't exist, great. Have I generated a bug I can't get out of? I hope not, let's see. Let's delete that variable, good. Okay, so there's investment. I need an integral block now, so I type an ampersand. Call this capital. Okay, I'll flip that around just to make it go backwards. And then I'll have, say, K underscore 0, initial level of capital as a parameter. Make that, say, 300. Wire that in as the initial value. Wire investment up to the integral block. Curve it a bit. And now capital, now divide by the, say, K, Y, not jelly, but ratio. As another parameter. Do they value 3? I'll change the values if I need to later. And so divide capital by capital output ratio. And drag this around here to output. And then make a bit of space in here. Bring a graph down. And measure the employment level on one side, and I've got the wages rate. The wages aren't going to change in this model. There's no change in the wages level. Let's take a copy of that. Just to be safe, I don't want to get a bug getting in the way of doing a demo here. Put the two together and just hit and see what we get. There's your Phillips curve. There's your Goodwin model. And if you want to show the phase diagram, this is where I've taken a few tricks out of a few programs here. Let's bring down another graph over here. Then I can graph the employment level. I'll put it against the black again. I don't want to make a mistake trying to be too fancy and stuff myself up. And put this against the black on the the black on the bottom here, that one. There you go. Okay.
Steve, one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there can be more than 2 inputs to an operator.
Yep.
So can you, right now, the placement of the input translates into, say, if it's a divider, numerator and denominator. But if there are 3 or 4 inputs, how do you?
Oh, you just wire it up. So like this is not going to be mathematically valid, obviously. But if I wanted to end up putting the investment as an addition to capital, I fire it over here and I can bring profit down as well.
Yeah.
So I'll show you what's happening as I do that. I'll just delete those two. The nonsense anyway, but let's see. So you look at the equation at the moment, then you've got output as capital divided by the KY ratio. Now if I add investment to that, which is a mistake, of course, but let's take a look at what it does anyway.
Yeah.
Then that equation is now, well, there you go.
I see. So there should be two inputs, and you can have multiple, you can have a chain.
Yeah, but it'll make sure there aren't errors. Like that's obviously an error, of course. They do that for the heck of it. But if, for example, if I want to, for example, I'll just put a plus key. What can I do that's actually give a good demo of that? Well, I can actually feed this in. No, that'd hit the recursion error again. So be careful about that. But I can add, if I wanted to add, for example, let's just, for the heck of it, I'll put a couple of variables together.
You can have two inputs, and then to the output you can add another variable, and then
that's right. Yeah, feed it all together. So
that way you can have multiple.
Yeah, I mean, I'll show you the best example is the one by my PhD student for Portugal, and like that's a mess. You can't read it. The design canvas, by the way, is 100,000 by 100,000 pixels. You're looking at a 2,000 by 4,000 screen. So fundamentally, we could have a couple of hundred screens to make the whole thing visual if you went that large, but of course you get totally lost. So grouping is bad. Grouping is handled very badly right now. What we do instead is have a bookmarking feature. So you can come in and see how something is defined. Now notice here, there are three inputs to that plus sign. Over here, total demand, consumption plus exports, plus government consumption, plus gross capital formation by households, gross capital formation by non-financial businesses, and gross by government as well. So those 6 elements are added by one plus sign to give you total demand.
So if these are just additions, I guess you can add as many as you want.
Yeah, that's right. There's no limit.
If there are other operators, then I guess it becomes more complicated.
If
there are just multiplications, you probably can.
Well, multiplication is the same story. Multiply as many things you like to get together as once. But what I hope to do, I mean, this stuff is good that we have this feature, that capacity, but I find it really bloody hard to read it myself. So what I'd rather see is that as a single equation. So then total demand is this plus this plus this, standard old mathematics format. And that's what we'll bring in the next version. So we'll just go back and take a look at this full screen, which is really complicated. All this stuff in the next version will be on a tab. So all you'll have is the 5 stock flow consistent godly tables, and the graphs will be somewhere else as well, so it'll be much more readable. But the major factor, I think, for us getting our ideas across is for policymakers to be able to look at our stuff and understand it rather than looking at our stuff and freaking out as they do at the moment. And this is freak out material as it stands.
Steve, a question. Of course, we use simulation primarily to solve nonlinear models, so they solve linear models with simulation. And the signature way of creating a nonlinearity in system dynamics, although there are many ways of doing it, the signature is with what we call a table function, right, or a graphical function. Have the equivalent capability in Minsky, or do you have to write a continuous function? Or?
We've got to write a continuous function at the moment. Again, that's something we intend adding. So we don't even have a display object as like a spreadsheet table. We don't have that yet. So like the precursors for setting up a graph or a table, a correspondence table, we don't have as yet. That's actually, pop that in a list to me, Mike, because that's one thing I might forget to do. Because Russell's actually turning up next week in Amsterdam. We'll have a good old chat about what our design targets are for the next version with this £200,000 funding. So we can do a hell of a lot. So that we can cover that one as well. I might quickly show you just the one thing which I know is completely novel in Minsky is the godly table side of things. So I'll show you the power of that. Let's say I want to design a model of a banking system and make it a bit larger. So I'm going to have reserves. and then I'll make it a simple one, loans to firms, and then have firms as having a deposit account and workers, and then you've got the bank itself or the banking sector. You can have multiple banks if you want, it's just a case of defining it that way. But then if I say that there's a loan, first of all, then you have lend to firms here, increasing the assets of the banking sector, and then lend increases the deposit. That's endogenous money in one line. Then say repayment. So you're going to have minus repay, which reduces the loan as well. And then interest. So you pay interest out of here, and it goes into the bank's equity. And then you're going to hire workers. So there's going to be wages taken out of here. And paying into here. And then consumption by workers. So I just have CO NS underscore by workers. And I forgot the minus sign. I'll just illustrate what happens if you make a mistake like that. So I now got 2 coming up. There should be a 0. So I've got to go back here and say, forgot the minus sign. And then consumption by bankers. Again, I won't worry about spelling mistakes there. There's going to be minus consumption out of here. And that's going to go to the firms. Having done that, then if you look at what's actually happened in Minsky, these equations have been defined. Okay, and then if you want to see it, well, that's seeing it from the point of view of the banking sector. I'll just really put the label and make this banking sector. And I want to see it from the point of view of the firm sector. Then bring up the Godly table, currently blank, and just check and see what assets haven't been allocated what liabilities haven't been allocated as assets. Click on firms, all the operations come across. What liabilities haven't been allocated, loans to firms, and then say, well, consumption by bankers is going to increase your equity. Ditto consumption by workers. Interest payments reduce your equity, and wages reduce your equity. And that's now to find it from the point of view of the firms. And then I can have one more, and this is going to be workers. They got a pretty simple Godly table, of course. So what did the asset have been allocated? Yeah, the only asset is the workers, and that's consumption reduces their equity and wages increase their equity. And now what you've got to find is a fairly reasonable definition of a very simple financial system. What you want to do is then start defining the variables. So if I right-click here, I can choose copy all the flow variables. I get a grouping of them. Copy all the stock variables, another grouping over here. Ungroup. Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to flip. Oh dear. I'll try it again. That's what I've got. Ungroup. Okay, those are all the assets. Ungroup the flows. And the simplest one is the interest payments. So if I can define interest payments, and I'll simply say interest payments, the rate of interest on loans, which I've got to now enter as a new parameter. And I'll get the value, say, 0.055%, and then call it a parameter as well. I can make it a variable, obviously, at a later stage, and then have multiply. I'll now make this full screen so you can see a bit more easily. Hang on. Multiply loans by interest rate to define your, hang on. Define interest by firms, and you go across to the equations, you now find that part of the thing has been defined. So I think you can see you can define something pretty rapidly in Minsky, and I want to make it faster.
Interesting. So actually, you don't write equations like we do in Stella and Vensim.
No.
The icons create the equations. That's
well, you can actually, not yet, but that is going to be possible in the next major release. So at the moment, you've got to do everything on the canvas, and I think it's got obvious advantages in terms of seeing what the equations are at a small scale, but at a large scale, too many equations, you can't read the damn thing. So what we're going to bring in is a tab up here. Currently got that just shows the output of the canvas. We're going to have also a definitions tab and a parameters tab. So once I've defined RL, that'll turn up on the parameters tab over there, and I could define all this stuff on a variables tab as well. So all these equations would be written in a line of text like you see in Stella, only they'll all be in one page. So you can see the whole lot in one place. You don't need to go from one variable to another to see what the definitions are.
Yeah, fascinating.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd be really pleased if you guys, either sign up to. I'll send a copy to Mike of the latest version, but if you started using it, just use it a bit. If you sign up to the Patreon page, is $1 a month. I hope that's not too much, and that would give you access to all the other people who are using it, the beta releases as they come out, the final releases. And which I'd like some intelligent feedback from the community to continue designing this in a way that makes it usable for everybody.
By the way, does it run on Mac or PC?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it runs Mac, PC, and Linux.
Yeah.
Cross-platform.
It's great. This is a lot of work to do this.
Indeed. Yeah.
Let alone to then use it to make models.
That's it. Yeah, but I spend a lot of my time. People think Minsky is a model. Minsky is a tool for designing models.
Right.
Great. Well, Steve, thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions for Steve?
Thanks a lot, Steve.
You're welcome. Look, guys, I'd really be pleased if you downloaded a copy. I'll send one to Mike. Play with it a bit. Give us some feedback. It'll fall over. You'll find bugs. Please, if you do find a bug, take a note of it. And there's a SourceForge bug page as well to report those things too, because we're going on a bug hunting expedition in the next year to kill them all.
Can you send me a Mac version?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
All right. And back to you, Mike.
So Steve, before we all adjourn, could you give back, stop sharing, or maybe I can do it. I would like to just quickly.
Yeah, here we go. Stop share there. There you go.
Okay. And let's see, I go here. And so can everybody see my screen now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick then, here is our YouTube page. This is the recording of our first meeting. And our second one, which is taking place now, I will, when we conclude, I'll have the software process the video and I'll upload it to the YouTube page. So you'll be able to watch this, or others, or Steve, if you want your programmer to see
that'd be great.
Little clinker or whatever, that's where it'll be. Again, we have a Facebook page. We should start to talk a little bit about Minsky over here. And I think we'll do that and link to your page and this sort of thing. First, we want to maybe start thinking about actively using our LinkedIn capabilities here, because quite a lot of people are utilize LinkedIn. Before we go then, one last thing is, I think we're looking at maybe September for our next meeting. The summer, at least in the this part of the world, is summer, is busy for people going on vacation and whatever. So I think we'll look for September for our next Zoom chapter meeting, and we'll probably send out some thoughts about a strategic plan, what we want to do going forward. David Wheat provided some food for thought today. Khalid Saeed responded, and there are others who have thoughts about what we might do. And so stay tuned for that. And again, I want to thank Steve very much for taking the time. That was really cool. Time you show me Minsky, it's better. So God bless you, and keep going.
Yeah, we're going to keep on rolling for sure.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Okay, see you, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.